how do we grow this influence of black leaders, men and women, that can represent our industry inside the ANC, inside the policy-making structures?
Get to grips with the digital environment, put together best practices, what works and what doesn't, very importantly.
In the project that we're doing in Chatlash, we've created a linking bridge between those two little areas there. So it becomes a matter of just 10 minutes walk from one side to the other.
So my message to our CEOs and those chief investment officers is, where at the end of the day do you want to see your role?
So by treating all of our water back to a stage where we can bring it back into the process, we're in effect saving around about 35% of our water usage on site.
Welcome to greeneconomy.tv. I'm your host and facilitator, Byron McDonald. Today, we have our second episode of the Circular Show. We have our regulars on. That's Chris Whyte, director of the African Circular Economy Network, and Gordon Brown, publisher of Green Economy Journal, and our lovely student, Nolwazi Mbhele. But before I go ahead, as I say each show, greeneconomy.tv provide insight and intelligence on all sustainability-related matters. Now, with saying that, let's invite on our guests. Hey, guys.
Hi, Byron.
How you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
I just think Chris is muted on that side, so we would love to hear him. I have no power from the side anymore.
Hello, Byron. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, so I'll hand over to Gordon so we can get started and get into the show.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed to Byron, and thank you and welcome again to Chris Whyte and to Nolwazi. So just to remind viewers who we are, firstly, my name's Gordon Brown, publisher of Green Economy Journal. Today, as was the case last week, and as will be the case for a series up ahead, we'll be speaking about the circular economy. And as our standing guest, we have expert in that subject, Chris Whyte. Chris, maybe you can just give us a few words of introduction for yourself, please.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm one of the directors on the executive team of the African Circular Economy Network. We're a non-profit corporation based in South Africa, but we have a membership of over 100 different members in 31 African countries. And we have a much larger database of people across many other African countries. So our focus is looking at advocacy, innovation, development, design, and promoting the circular economy across Africa.
Great, thank you very much indeed. And Nolwazi Mbhele, student at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, studying environmental management. Great to have you on the show as always. Perhaps just give us a brief insight into some of the key things that you're studying at the moment in your qualification.
Oh, okay. So I'm doing environmental management at CPUT. It's more of EIA practices, but then I'm still trying to figure it out because I chose the geotechnology route. So yeah. Right.
Okay, great. So you're studying about environmental impact assessments, and certainly circular economy is one of the things that would come up in that topic, I guess. So this is a bit of a trick question back over to you, Chris, but perhaps just to give us a sense for students that are studying degrees like Nolwazi's, is there any connection? What are the sort of touch points that you might see in for example, the study or the analysis of risk assessment for projects and businesses and the practice of circular, or the thinking, if you like, of circular economy?
Well, my interest peaked when Nolwazi said she was looking at geotechnology. I'm a geologist by training, so if you look at the the sort of formal education side of things. I think a good science-based degree, geology, hydrology, geography, environmental sciences, can really lead to great opportunities across a wide spectrum of career applications in future. I started off as a geologist. I probably wouldn't recognize a rock now if it hit me square between the eyes. I haven't practiced geology since I qualified. I then did a master's degree in geographic information from City University of London, 5-7 years after I qualified. And I was working in high-resolution satellite imagery, looking at geobotanical anomalies, identifying mining applications from space. That got me into sustainability. And as I said, I think the last chat we had is that I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. But for now, they're calling me a circular economy expert. I think what people need to understand, Nolwazi and a lot of the youngsters out there, is that it's often very difficult when you're in that academic environment to actually see a way forward. And we're still very much premised on formal career moves. The world's not like that anymore. So I think, youngsters have got to just be mindful of the fact that they might not see the open path in front of them. But don't restrict themselves and never look at this as a narrow focus. Always take the broad focus and pick up whatever comes along your way. The world works in strange ways, but formal education, vital groundstone, but you'll learn as you get older. You suddenly go, that's why I did chemistry 101. I hated chemistry at university, but it's really served me well up until now.
Wise words indeed. And I studied law, and here I am involved in the media and doing all sorts of things not related to the law. But there you go. So let's hope that Nolwazi does indeed practice in the environmental space. We need young minds and bright, enthusiastic, passionate people in the sector. Really, that's what's going to take us forward, and that's how we're going to change the world. So on the subject of that, Chris, last week we spoke in very high level terms about circular economy. We're speaking about some of the structures that you were involved in internationally. We spoke briefly about the African Circular Economy Network. This week we want to get a little bit more practical. We'd like to speak about some examples of circular economy, some I hasten to say the word case studies, but more sort of success stories, just connecting the dots and helping viewers to get a deep appreciation of what circular economy is all about. From this African perspective, how does circular economy fit into the African experience? Let's perhaps put it that way. Chris?
Well, it's a good place to start, Gordon. The reality is that circularity and circular principles have been applied in Africa for an awful lot longer than anywhere else. We always think that our northern neighbors in developed countries like Europe and America are going to be far more advanced than we are here. The simple reality is that Africa is very circular, and it's not really circular by design. It's circular by need. So, very simple example: food waste is a no-no in Africa. We have in South Africa we have Ubuntu. We would share our sort of perishable products with our neighbors before seeing anything go to waste. We have this. It's a term I can't remember if Nolwazi might be able to tell me what it is, but often. Our people will go to somebody's house with their own plates to take away the leftovers. So we're used to not wasting from that perspective. But even if you look at clothes, we have secondhand clothes, we have third-hand clothes. I think I probably still have an old pair of my underpants in the drawer that I use for polishing my shoes. We don't throw it away until it's like really, really dead. Cell phones and computers last 10, 15 years in Africa. They're refurbished and rebuilt, and they're put back into commission time and time again until they're absolutely dead. Whereas in Europe, an iPhone might have a lifespan of 8 to 12 months before they throw it away and get the latest one. So we have a very definite change, and a lot of it is due to also the lifestyle management sort of sector where we are. and the poverty levels and the requirement in terms of being able to say we need to be more sustainable in terms of looking at our use of energy. If we have to collect wood or charcoal for our domestic heating, water, also you're a lot more sparing with water if you've got to walk 20 kilometers to go and pick it up. So there's a culture of circularity already in Africa. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of success stories coming from Africa recently where we're looking at, again, just taking realistic applications and saying, here's an opportunity to be able to take resources and look at developing something that makes sense. So circularity, again, remember, is not just about, we went into this in the last meeting, it's not just about recycling. Circular economy is not a buzzword for recycling. Circular economy is about the bigger element. It's a cross-sectoral component where we talk about everything from energy to water to waste, to tourism, to manufacturing, etc. So when you look at the applications we're seeing in Africa, we're getting that cross-sectoral approach. So it's a sharing economy. It's a sustainable economy. Take a wild example. Agriculture in Africa, one of the biggest issues we have with conventional or formal agriculture is the cost. So having to acquire and run and service and manage a tractor, as a prime example, would be a massive cost for a small-scale farmer. So there's an organization called Whyte, as a prime example. They're based in Nigeria. I think they're in a couple of other countries now. And Whyte is an organization that basically has like a tractor for Ubers, Uber for tractors. So you don't need to buy a tractor. You can rent it by the hour, and they will bring it across to you. You plow your fields, you do what you need to do, and the tractor goes back, and somebody else manages the service and the maintenance and the fuel and everything else. And even on
that type of example, don't they do that with big pieces of capital equipment like combined harvesters and seasonal harvesters? Don't you have a similar approach taken there, don't you?
It's normally the bigger pieces of equipment. What we've had a look at before in the past was that a group of farmers would get together and they would purchase a combine harvester in a sort of a concession or a commission. Again, if it's sitting idle for 4 hours of the day, you're wasting money. Most of us drive fancy cars that sit in our garages for 20 hours of the day, to be real. Yeah. So, when we start looking at the inefficiencies of things like transport and infrastructure, but Africa is different. If you look at even the smallest type of things, we have a plethora of small plant hire systems across South Africa and probably in the rest of Africa as well, because it doesn't make sense for me to buy a chainsaw and keep it in my garage for years and years and years gathering dust when I only use the thing maybe 3 times a year and cutting down the odd tree. So instead of buying a chainsaw, we go to a small plant hire place and we use it by the hour. Again, that's really is an element of circularity. So we're trying to move out of this whole take, make, and dispose mode of the linear economy. And we're starting to see the change now in Europe, for example, where they're saying they need to design the system. So instead of people owning a washing machine or owning a chainsaw or a car, they would lease or rent that on its application and its use, which also drives the designers to manufacture that for a lot longer use, so that you don't have a washing machine that lasts 2 to 3 years and you've got to throw it out because the PC board costs more than a new washing machine. Those things are coming to end. We're seeing big policies across Europe where you now have to make sure that it's built to last and that it is fixable.
Wow. So, Chris, you've touched on this business model. I mean, it's certainly very interesting. It's something that gets spoken about at sustainability conferences as a futuristic notion, especially in the context of public transport, where there's this. It's within the realms of the electric vehicle, the smart car, and the self-drive vehicle. It's sort of almost the Uber model taken to the next level. Do you see any of these types of examples happening in Africa? Is there Are there any thoughts that you can share with us where you see this sort of thing happening just as a spontaneous reaction to the way that Africans relate to problems?
Absolutely. There's many examples. There's I think Green Cabs in Cape Town is a prime example where they've got a specialized Uber service using electric vehicles for the discerning traveler. So some people who don't want to travel in a combustion engine, they want to do their thing for the planet, and they will pay for an electric vehicle to pick them up. But we're also seeing differences now with a sort of infrastructure change in Africa, looking at mass transport systems, where we've got to understand the facts and the realities. In South Africa, we often talk about our problems with traffic. Joburg is a nightmare, as you know. Cape Town is impossible. But believe me, it is a walk in the park compared to Kinshasa or to Lagos or to Nairobi. Those cities have just blossomed in terms of they've just gone so far beyond their capacity to manage the number of people there. And we need to just think more carefully in terms of things like moving people. So share rides. We're seeing a number of initiatives across the country with bicycles. And this is, you get this right across Europe. I can go to Munich and I can put €5 into a meter and I can pick up a bicycle and I can ride it for 5 kilometers to the next point and drop it off. And we're starting to see that here. It's a little bit more difficult in Africa because we tend to steal bicycles a lot. But we're moving towards those sort of things, and it really is starting to get a momentum behind that. So we need to look at issues around that. Logistics are a huge issue. In South Africa, we've been looking at that for a while now. We're saying we have some of the best rail transport networks in the world, but we've got so many trucks on the road because we're not using the system efficiently. So we've got to go back to looking at efficiencies in transport and logistics and moving things around.
Well, just an interesting point that you've touched on is this idea of the technology dumping versus leapfrogging. All right. So in Africa, we've mentioned that we use things a lot longer. Cell phones last a lot longer. You know, what that means is we have a tolerance also and a demand almost for older stuff. At the same time, we don't really want to be a dumping ground for old technology. We really want to go straight to the best technologies, the world-leading technologies that other economies or other sectors might not be able to go to because they're busy paying off current investments. We can potentially go straight to those solutions. I mean, a consumer example is that in Africa, people went straight from having no telephony straight to cellular telephony instead of going to landline or fixed line first. How important is it within the circular economy thinking and circular economy innovation? How important is it for us to ensure that we take the global best practice, whether that's African or Asian or Latin American or Western, whatever, and implement that here now immediately, and avoid sort of having to go through the steps before getting to that end point?
There's a whole host of opportunities in terms of looking at that. I mean, the example that you gave is a good example, but there's still a gap in the industry. So if you look at in computers, the simple reality is not everybody can get access to the latest high-tech computer. So refurbishment is a critical issue in terms of our e-waste strategy in Africa, to be able to provide systems that at least provide basic infrastructure and communications. But there are moves afoot in terms of some of the other issues about standing on other shoulders. The waste industry is a prime example. So we have already gone down the path in South Africa of looking at landfill as the solution to waste. And yet, if you look at the landfill directives in Europe, it's saying no more landfill. So they're already saying you cannot landfill this, that, the next thing, and there are different alternative solutions for those. We have an opportunity there to piggyback onto those technological innovations and look at those sort of opportunities locally, because we too cannot afford to build new landfill sites and systems. But there's a bent to that as well, because we're also seeing incredible innovation and technology coming out of Africa, which is strange enough finding more flavor and better market applications in Europe than it is here. And again, so we need to look at smaller scale systems that work in Africa, because again, remember the logistical issues we have in Africa. You can fit the whole of the United States, China, and India into Africa. We have massive, massive surface area, and there's huge distances between our populations and resources. So we've got to look at different systems. And I think there's a great opportunity to be able to engage with a lot of the work that's been done in terms of circular economy to understand the waste sector, where we have a perfect opportunity in Africa as a resource-rich country. Most of the mines that supply the world's resources are based in Africa. And yet we are very wasteful in that system. We throw away the mine tailings and the blast grit and the ash and all these other bits and pieces. And these are all ideal building materials for a number of different applications that are greener and more sustainable than most conventional applications. So we're seeing that move towards that. There's always going to be a resistance to it. Gordon, the simple reality is that people are very resistant to change. But the more we understand about the successes within Africa and Europe, the faster we can transition to a circular economy future without making the same mistakes of others before us.
Makes a lot of sense. Just one of the just as you speak about this global picture and Africa's role in the global picture, do you see circularity as being a globalized solution? You spoke about localized, yes. I'll give you an example. Recycling of e-waste. What we see, often very negative images, but we see these entire villages or towns in China dedicated to recycling of e-waste, for example. Is it better for everybody to ship their e-waste to one place, or is it better to change systems so that those sorts of things are localized? And I guess the answer is, well, it works in some ways and differently in other ways. But your comment on that as it affects the thinking in terms of a circular economy, Chris?
It's managing the issues, Gordon. I think we've got to look at it rather not as a threat, but as an opportunity. So if you look at the e-waste sector, and it's not just China, I can show you pictures in Ghana and Nigeria of massive areas where there's indiscriminate burning of cables going on, and children running around in smoke and beating up circuit boards to try and pull out copper. It's not just a third world issue, but in adversity, there's opportunity. And some of the stuff that we're seeing now, for example, I'm busy working at the moment with the World Resources Forum. And I've been appointed as one of the local technical coordinators for South Africa to develop systems and solutions around understanding the different fractions of e-waste and the vertical integration of developing circular economies out of those. And the issue we've always faced in South Africa or any African country really is that we are cherry picking at the moment. So in e-waste, for example, we would take out the steel, the aluminium and the copper and pretty much throw everything else away. And then the printed circuit boards would go to an offshore company. And those are then processed in Canada, Japan, and there's a couple of big refineries around the world. And we've never really had the volumetric resources to justify the investment into Africa. And yet if we all worked together and understood that we're all exporting this stuff, we've got plenty of resources in this country. And let's rather look at a centralized African facility where we can look at maximum beneficiation and extraction of all of the different metals, materials, and minerals out of the electronic waste and add value to it locally. And the kind of work that you're seeing from the World Resources Forum through their Sustainable Recycling Industries program is dedicated to looking at these issues in understanding the problem of Europe sending their rubbish to Africa, trying to see that as an opportunity to develop skills and resources and opportunities to add value to that locally, but also to look at the way that we can upskill people. We're providing different skills in sectors, but resource efficiencies and resource management is also vitally important, because if you can imagine the amount of materials that are exported from this country as raw resources, whereas we could be beneficiating those locally. And we're seeing that coming through the European Green Deal. We're seeing that the push that it no longer makes sense to import or export our low-grade products into Europe, because they're under such restrictive regimes now, with new directives coming through, with the new Green Deal, with the application to the Paris Climate Agreement, the UNFCCC, where they have to watch their energy usage, they have to watch their carbon footprint, they have to also be very aware of the restrictions that we've seen with COVID that have imposed upon us as a globe, with the fragility of global supply chains and moving mass products from one part of the world to the other. So there's huge opportunities there for Africa to really tap into what's right there, right in front of us right now. And we're seeing a lot of different organizations moving towards unpacking and understanding that.
Awesome. Nolwazi, you've been sitting there, you've been listening intently. Any thoughts from your side, any comments or any questions from you at this point?
So Chris, you spoke about designing products for the environment, so to make them last longer, to make them, recyclable or reusable. My question is, okay, so I was at Spa the other day, and as I was passing, I saw these paper cups and, plastic cups. And then I realized that the paper cups were much more expensive than the plastic cups. And so my question is, don't you think that will disencourage people to buy the plastic cups and not the paper cups?
Question.
There's an entire suite of PhD thesis applications in that, Nolwazi. There's been a huge amount of work done internationally in terms of understanding the carbon footprint of supposed more sustainable products versus plastic. The reality is that plastic in 9 out of 10 applications will have a far lower carbon footprint than any of the other packaging materials. The problem is our management of that waste stream. It's not the waste. It's not the package itself. It's what we do with it afterwards. And I think that's where we need to look at unpacking the opportunities. There are thousands and thousands of different types of plastics. Everyone thinks about the 7 recycling symbols. Believe me, there are thousands of different types of plastics. Anything with a number 7 basically means any plastic invented after 1987 or any combination thereof. So it's a huge mishmash of just about anything that can fit under there. And they put a lovely little number 7 recycling symbol on it, which actually means nothing. So the opportunity is to look at how we design for recyclability in a means where we unpack the entire life cycle assessment of that. So if you're having a paper cup, where's that fiber coming from? Is it coming from a sustainable source? So, if it's coming from forestry and you've got to grow trees for 21 years in order to get your fiber, that may not be so sustainable. But if it's coming from hemp or bamboo, it may be more sustainable. So we need to understand there's levels within that where we need to look at the composition of materials, where those materials are sourced from, how they are manufactured, and the efficiency of the system that was manufacturing them. So it's not a simple question. And this is a very difficult thing to get across to the man in the street, the housewife who's out there saying, I want to make a stand and make a decision, but it's so complicated. And we need to simplify that for people and get them to understand what they can and what they can't do.
Absolutely. Nolwazi, do you have a follow-up question? And then perhaps we can ask Byron if you've got any thoughts from your side. But Nolwazi, do you have a follow-up question?
Would you say that that's one of the biggest challenges in implementing circular economy?
Yeah, understanding. People need to understand and know more about what's going on. Social media is allowing us great opportunities to be able to educate people, and that's what this program is about as well. We need to get that information out there to people, get people to understand It's not black and white. There are shades of gray to the nth degree between them. And how do we expect everyone to understand that? We need to make it more palatable, more understandable. So whether that's me, whether it's Gordon, yourself, so we're educating ourselves here and we can speak to our friends, or whether it's through producer responsibility organizations or brand managers. These are all critical issues where we need to be open and honest about the issues that we're facing. And if we understand that, and if we can measure it, and if we can measure it, then we can manage it. If we can manage it, then we can look at solutions, and we can design systems and applications that will unlock jobs, create opportunities, create economies, and turn the circular economy into an essential life skill for everybody.
So,
Byron, any thoughts or comments from your side?
Yeah, so just to add on and latch on to Nolwazi's first question. So this might sound like a question just to ask on entrepreneurs and inventors, right? So as you know, you want to resell your products, and nowadays guys don't care about what's going on there. We are very aware of health conscious, green economy and all these things, but yet guys chase money in the end of the day. How do you convince that investor, convince that inventor, convince that entrepreneur to say, look at your product, you can resell it, but the longevity of your product needs to extend more than what it is. You know, when you go to a mechanic, he fixes your car to come back again. How do we convince these people that it's not just about the money? It's all good and humane, yes, in the end of the day, and we all understand it, but how do we get the investors involved and the inventors involved?
It's a valid point, and I think that the what we are seeing is we're seeing a big move towards that. So this is being driven largely through policy and directives. We were working with the group in Belgium called Trinomics, who are developing the directives for green design, and those are critical elements that they need to look at. So policy is now starting to drive the directive in terms of ensuring that we design for recyclability. And also, if you look at other directives like extended producer responsibility, where we have a gap in that market and we need to look at a solution for a particular problem, there needs to be a responsibility. That responsibility will be shared generally by the producer and by the consumer. And the producer will try and pass on most of it to the consumer, and the consumer will demand more and more from the producer. So there's a system that is in place that is creating change, and it's moving at such a rapid pace that I'm very hopeful for it. We've got a lot to learn. Again, we can learn a lot from what's happened in Europe. But again, European EPR standards are very different to our own extended producer responsibility standards because we have a very different system of play. So it's all in the motions, but policy, design, and the consumer, believe me, the power of the consumer, vote with your wallet. That's going to change the world.
Well, and we've seen that. I mean, you only have to look at the effect on the sale of plastic straws in recent years to understand the power of the consumer. But folks, that's all we have time for today. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Chris, to Nolwazi, and as always to our host Byron. Just in terms of next week, same time, same conversation, different theme. So we've touched on this, we mentioned this a number of times already today, but extended producer responsibility. That's the theme we're going to go into in a little bit more detail. There's a lot happening right now. Government busy engaging the private sector. I know that Chris is involved in these conversations. What does it mean? How does it affect us? And to what extent does this thinking and this policy instrument help to advance this idea of circularity and circular economy? That's the conversation next week, folks. See you then. Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye from me, Gordon Brown.
See you guys. Have a good evening. Good day for the evening. Bye. That was a good conversation. See you guys, same place next week with a new topic on this side. As I always say each week, greeneconomy.tv provide insight and intelligence on all sustainability related matters.
How do we grow this influence of black leaders, men and women, that can represent our industry inside the ANC, inside the policy making structures?
Get to grips with the digital environment, put together best practices, what works and what doesn't, very importantly.
In the project that we're doing in Chaplat, we've created a linking bridge between those two little areas there. So it becomes a matter of just 10 minutes walk from one side to the other.
So my message to our CEOs and those chief investment officers is, where at the end of the day do you want to see your role?
So by feeding all our water back to a stage where we can bring it back into the process, we're in effect saving around about 35% of our water usage on site.